A New Pup and Some Old Tricks by AmbuCutie23. I never given much thought to how I would die, but dying in the place of someone I love seems like a good way to go. Bella Swan, Twilight. Okay, hi, this is AmbuCutie23, and this is my first official Twilight story, and for all my personal reasons, Jacob goes to Forks along with the rest of the Quaaludes, and the treaty doesn't make it where they can't go on each other's land, so whatever. This takes place after New Moon. Not gonna see a lot of Bella or some of the vampires. I will try to include them as much as I can, and Jacob let his hair grow out after he turned. Oh, and I don't own Twilight. That is Stephanie Meyer. So, on with the show! Hi, my name is Danny, and I am the new student at Forks High. Yippee for me, and I can't wait to get there. Sarcasm intended. I walked into Forks High, my long black hair in a tall ponytail, so you could read the back of my shirt easily. I had on a camouflage shirt with black paw prints on the front, and on the back it said, "Do you know where I can get my hands on a master cylinder for a 1986 Volkswagen Rabbit?" And at the bottom it said, "DNS Body Shop, for all your best auto repairs and parts." A pair of faded blue jeans, and a pair of black and red tennis shoes. I smiled as I walked by boys who were turning their heads towards me, only to look up. Yeah, I'm incredibly tall, and probably think, dang, the new girl is smokin'. My dark green eyes lit with excitement as they all turned they heads. I walked past the guys going into the office to get my schedule. Oh, joy of joys. When I walked in, I saw a tall, tan boy with long black hair and dark chocolate brown eyes, and the pearliest whites you have ever seen. I looked at the boy and walked next to him, leaning on the desk saying, "Hi, Danny Ross, new student, here to pick up my schedule." I flipped my hair over my shoulder so the boy could read it. He did. He smiled as he saw what it said. Looking at me, he said in a smooth, husky voice, "Hi, Jacob Black. Nice to meet you, Danny. That your dad's shop or something?" I smiled, showing off my pearly whites, saying, "No, it's my shop and my sister's. She will be here Monday. She was sick today." "Wow, you own your own shop? Nice. And it's not so bad, she'll feel better soon. So, what's your first period?" I looked at my schedule and said, "Gym. You?" He smiled and said, "Gym. I think I'm starting to like this school." I looked at Jacob and said, "So wanna walk to class together? Or are you scared of the big bad new girl?" He smirked and said, "I like the sound of that." We walked to the gym, talking about my life, where I came from, what school I was at last, how old I was, favorite music, what type of cars I like to work on, normal stuff. When we got to the gym, I walked to the locker room, and before I walked in, a turned around and said, "See you in a minute, Jacob." I winked at him and slid into the locker room, changing into the uniform, which fit me nicely. When I walked out, Jacob was already waiting. I smiled and walked over to him saying, "Hi there. Told you I would see you soon." Jacob looked at me, and I mean he looked at me. "Wow, you look great in that uniform. I mean, wow." I smirked and said, "I know I'm hot, aren't I?" "So, what are we doing in gym today?" "The mile." I smiled. "Awesome. I love running, and I was wondering, do they have a track team here?" "Yeah, you want to join or something?" "Yes. What about you? Are you going to join?" "Maybe, since you are going to be on it. I might just join this year." I smiled, walking over to the coach saying, "Hi, my name is Danny. I'm the new student. Here is my schedule." I handed her the slip of paper and returned to Jacob with a smile on my face. We soon did the mile. Jacob and I were tied for first place, but I won. I had a time of 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Jacob had a time of 5 minutes and 21 seconds. I cheered in triumph and flipped my hair at Jacob, saying, "I don't think you are cut out for the track team if you can't even outrun me." "You beat me by 1 second." "Yeah, that is 1 second faster than you," I said, poking him in the cheek. He smiled at me and picked me up, saying, "Yeah, but I'm stronger than you." "Ah, Jacob, put me down," I said, laughing and clinging to his tight black V-neck shirt. Jacob smiled as I clung to him, not letting go. "Not until you say I'm stronger, faster, and so incredibly hot." "Okay, you're stronger than me, faster than me, and so incredibly hot. Now put me down," I said, squealing as he twirled me around, saying, "Not until you say you will go to La Push with me tomorrow." I laughed and said, Fine, I'll go to La Push tomorrow. Now put me down." I smiled as he gently placed my feet on the ground, not taking his hands off my waist, saying, "Good. Just to let you know, La Push is a beach on the reservation. So wear your bathing suit, okay? I will pick you up tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Sound good to you? I see how it is. You asked me to go to the beach so you can see me in a bathing suit, right? Typical teenage boy. And 8 o'clock is fine, but my sister is coming along too. I said, tisking him and waving my finger back and forth. Though that may be true, don't make me mad or I will pick you up again, Missy, and this time I won't put you down. He said, his grip on my waist tightening and the gap between us growing smaller. I closed my eyes as he leaned closer when Coach Clapp, not gonna make any mean jokes, but I want to so badly, walked over and said, Mr. Black, Miss Ross, PDA, we are still on school grounds. Jacob reluctantly loosened his grip from me and stepping back a few feet. I had a small frown on my face when I thought of something as I said smiling, we'll finish this tomorrow. Don't make me wait, Mr. Black. He smiled and said whispering in my ear, I won't, Miss Ross. I blushed, which was pretty hard to see on my tan skin, and walking to the locker room, changing and going to my next period. I walked into my next class, World History. I handed my slip to the teacher. He was a tall, thin man with brown hair and brown eyes. He handed me back my slip and pointed to an empty seat at a table with one extra seat next to mine. I smiled at him and sauntered over to my seat, sitting down and pulling out my history book. As I took out my book, someone had pulled the chair next to me and sat down. When I looked up, it was none other than Jacob. A smirk grew on his face as he said in his husky voice, Hey, looks like we have 2 classes together. I think I'm gonna like this school year a lot more. I smiled and said, Me too. And it is just a coincidence that the teacher put me right next to you, I presume? Jacob showed off his brilliant white teeth as he smiled an ear-to-ear grin. Maybe. Hey, let me see your schedule, he said, starting to dig around inside my bag. I sighed and said, My schedule is in my pocket, Jacob. I went to reach for it when Jacob's hand was already in my pocket, fishing out my schedule. My face went a whole new shade of red as I said in a whisper, What do you think you're doing? Get out of my pocket! He smiled and took his hand out, holding my schedule in his big, strong-looking hands. My heated face soon cooled down as I heard Jacob say, Hey look, we have all the same classes. I clapped my hands sarcastically and said, Yay! I get to spend every waking moment of school with a tall, tan person who likes to put his hands in girls' pockets. Well, you are the only girl I have put my hands in her pocket. You must feel so honored, he said laughing. I joined him and said laughing, Yes, I'm so honored that the almighty Jacob Black put his hand in my pocket. You should have a monument built just for this occasion. Jacob looked at me and said, I would much rather have you go on a little nature walk with me tomorrow. Oh, I see. You want to get me alone. What are you going to do? Feed me to the wolves? I would love to see you try, I said sarcastically. Just as he was about to answer, the bell rang, sending us to lunch. I stood up swiftly, walking out of the door with my bags, forgetting my textbook. Lunch and the rest of my classes went by quickly. I talked to Jacob about vintage cars and stuff I have rebuilt. Simple stuff. When the last bell rang, sending us home, I kept walking to my car, a vintage 1986 Pontiac Firebird hardtop coupe, until I realized I had forgotten my book in world history. I ran back to the classroom and grabbed my book, ran to get to my car, until I bumped into something big, tall, and warm. I flatly landed on my butt, and my bag fell, scattering the contents all over the floor. I quickly scrambled to pick up my stuff, but when I went to pick up my book, the last thing on the floor, my hand was underneath someone else's. I looked up, my long black hair covering my eyes, blinding me to who it was, listening to see if I knew who it was. I heard a deep growl like a wolf or a husky. I don't know, but it was a person, and it was meant to be seductive or flirtatious. So I stood up, hitting whoever was there with the one thing in my hand, my water bottle. The person laughed, and I soon realized I didn't know this person. When I looked up, the person was a man, tall, tan, long cropped black hair, black eyes, and gorgeously handsome. I stood up, only to be a little taller than the man, and snatched my book from him and said in a fierce voice, Who are you? The person smiled and said, The name is Paul. Nice to meet you. Your name is Danny, right? The girl Jacob won't shut up about? My eyes narrowed as I said between clenched teeth, Hi, Paul. Yes, I'm Danny. What has Jacob said about me exactly? Paul laughed and said, He said how fast you were, and how much you looked like a native. He was right, by the way, and that you agreed to go to La Push with him tomorrow, and that you were incredibly hot. I unclenched my teeth and mustered up a smile, saying, "Do you know where Jacob is?" Paul smiled like he knew something I didn't and said, "Yeah, the auto shop class. Go outside, take a left. It's the last building on school campus. He is probably working on his Volkswagen or something. Oh, and the teacher, Mr. Morrison, probably already went home, so he is probably there alone." He smirked as I turned on a heel and walked to the auto shop class. When I got there, Paul was right. Jacob was the only one there, excluding me. As I stepped into the garage/classroom, Jacob immediately turned around and said, smiling, "Looks like Paul gave you my message." I glared at him and said, "You planned all this, didn't you?" Pointing a finger at him, which he only grabbed and took both my hands in his and said, "Maybe. So, like the ride?" Maybe if you let me see the inside, I will appreciate it more," I said, smiling, hoping he would let me inside. He smiled and said, "How about I take you for a joyride? You know, drive you home?" "Can't. Gotta take my ride home." His smile grew as he said, "Give me your car keys, and I promise your car will be parked in your yard when we get there." I smiled and pulled out my car keys, handing them over to Jacob. When his hand touched mine, I had this immense feeling of satisfaction and completion as I stared at Jacob, who would not break the trance we held. As we both stared at each other, he said out loud, not breaking the trance, "Imprint." I heard a noise and turned my head to see Paul and 4 other boys smiling and high-fiving each other. My face began to heat up as I said, "Jacob, what does imprint mean?" Jacob smiled and hugged me, saying, "I finally imprinted, and on you. I am so happy." "What does imprinting mean?" I looked at him with pleading and confused eyes. Jacob looked at me and sighed. "Imprinting means I'm always going to want to be the best thing for you, and I can tell you something very important. I am a werewolf." My mouth dropped, and I began to laugh. "You're a werewolf? You expect me to believe that you are a werewolf?" Jacob looked at me seriously and said in a stern voice, "I am not kidding, I am being serious." I looked at him and laughed at him more and fell over holding my sides because they hurt so much. Jacob was furious at me and he glared at me, said, "Would you stop laughing? It is really getting me mad." I stopped laughing and looked up at him from the ground and said, "You just told me you were a werewolf and you expect me not to laugh?" He glared even more and said in a firm voice, "Yes, I said I was a werewolf, and I was being serious. So how am I supposed to believe that you are a werewolf?" The other guys around us looked from me to Jacob and backed away slowly. Jacob put his hands next to my head and got really close to me on the floor, then said, "Look me in the eyes. Do I look like I'm lying?" I looked into Jacob's rich brown eyes, and they looked sincere. It can't be, can it? No, Jacob can't be a werewolf. Can he? Come on, Jacob. Stop the joke. It isn't funny anymore. Let me get up. I have to go home and take care of my sister. Jacob looked at me fiercely and said, No, you can't leave until you tell me you believe I am a werewolf. Show me proof, and I will believe you." Jacob and I locked eyes. Both of us had sweat on our brows. He looked at me so intently, so mesmerizing. Our breathing became heavy. Just then, Jacob leaned down and kissed me passionately. Heat crept up my face, and I laid there stunned with fear and bliss. Jacob broke the kiss and lifted his head, looking at me with lust. I stared at him intently. He looked like a god. And then I grabbed his head, pulling him down, kissing him fixatedly. I ran my fingers through his long hair as he cupped my face in his warm hands. The other guys that were there were all cheering and whistling, except one. He was the tallest of all the guys, and he looked like a senior. He looked at Jacob, then turned his head and walked the other way, saying something so softly I could barely make it out. It sounded like he said, "Oh great, another one of them." He emphasized on the word them. I looked at him confused, then back at Jacob, sliding out from under him and leaning on his car. Jacob stood up and looked at me sadly, saying, "What, was it something I did? If I went too far, I'm sorry. Please don't be upset." I turned my head, looking at my reflection in the mirror, and said, "No, it's not that. I just am tired." Jacob looked disbelievingly, but then said, "All right, here are your car keys. I'll see you tomorrow, right?" I smiled and nodded my head. I grabbed my keys and walked past Jacob's friends and getting into my car. When I got home, I went upstairs and checked on my sister. She was lying in bed. Her pale skin was even whiter, and black hair resting on the heading of her bed. My sister and I looked nothing alike besides our hair. She looked up at me and smiled, a weak smile, saying, "Hey sis, how was your day?" I looked at her and said, "It was fine, and you can stop acting sick now, Star." Her smile became full and vivid. "What? I really did feel bad. Did anything happen that I should know about?" "Not really. I made a new friend, and we are going to the beach with him tomorrow." Star got out of bed and said, "This is gonna be so much fun."